So as I've been learning Age of Mythology, I've been testing out the other pantheons and seeing what works best for me and all the different playstyles, and it's been going okay, I guess. My first objective really was to, well, find a way to win with any of them. As I played more matches, I have learned, of course, a bit more, and I picked up a certain strategy that seems to be pretty effective, at least in these early matches. At least I would say it's like 60-65% effective, and this is what has helped me get some wins in my early tenure of Age of Mythology. Make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Age of Mythology Retold content. Alright, so of course, I look at this in the sense of how I approach just about every pantheon. Now, it does change a little bit better. I don't have any of the Chinese or the Japanese gods yet, so I'm just playing with the base 3. I do have Atlantean, but I haven't touched that yet. I'm looking at it in the sense of what is going to be the smoothest, easiest strategy for me to get a victory? And this is what ends up happening. So, of course, the general objective of the initial start of the match is to get to the classic age within a reasonable amount of time. It does not have to be there first ahead of the opponent, but it definitely cannot be 5 minutes behind. My goal is to advance to the next age quickly, and I do this by focusing on materials required for the temple, and just enough to advance into the next age, so the 400 meat. While I'm doing this strategy, of course, I'm out scouting whatever with whatever unit I have, and my main objective there is to find any nearby relics that are good, and ideally the first settlement. Also, I use this time to note where the nearest gold mines are, as I realize how important they become later in the game. Now, during the level up time for my town, I then grab some research for wood or which race I'm playing. Honestly, I rarely go for the herding upgrade here, mainly because I'm usually very depleted on materials anyway, and I'd rather focus on the progression into the age first, and it usually depends. There's sometimes where I'll have a bunch of, we'll say, herded animals, so like pigs, goats, cows, whatever they are, but it's usually not as beneficial. Now I'm into classic age, and this is my next focus. The point here is, as soon as I get into this next age, I try to grab a settlement as soon as possible. The reason being is I feel like it skyrockets the economy for later into the game. Still training villagers and building the initial unit production site, so the barracks or the longhouse or what have you. The main focus here is really for defense. Sometimes if I'm fighting like a Norse enemy that will be very aggressive, it's very hard for me to keep up as I tend to be more economic focused, but I try my best to keep them at bay with what units that I have. I use this time to focus on the upgrades for that particular unit choice, depending on what god I have. Say, for example, if I was playing as like Hades, I would try to improve my Toxicities to medium and have some like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, we'll say, units that are medium and ready for a defensive fight. I also look for the immediate tower upgrades for the extra defenses early because it greatly slows down an attack. Now, with the big focus of this time, really looking at the economic boon. With the new settlement up, I hammer out securing either food or gold into production with the goal of advancing into heroic age as quickly as possible. Again, still training villagers, really looking to boost that economy and look to move into the heroic age as quickly as possible. If in this time I am attacked, then more of my resources go to defenses. If I'm left alone, then I make a straight beeline for the next age. I typically do research a few upgrades for my units here and there, depending on which ones I'm using. And also the unit choice that I make is usually 2 separate styles. I try to go for like a melee and a range, as I feel like this is a good balance between the two. I find myself using less and less myth units, aside from the ones that we get as soon as we get into the age, but all in all, this phase is about villager pumping and the settlement. Now moving into the heroic age. So the main focus here is, of course, to build a fort or a stronghold or what have you, and this is where the economy comes into show big time. I use this time to create a new gold mine building and grab a bunch of villagers to farm while capitalizing on the food production by switching to farms and their upgrades. Now the big idea is that the stronghold defends the new gold mine and other military buildings start catching up in production. This is where I really start laying on thick the unit production because the economy is working so hard and it's fairly secure. I usually hotkey all of my unit production buildings and spam them with units and to either force back the enemy or prepare for an advance on my end. Now, I also use that economy and that huge load of villagers to move forward to capture a 3rd settlement and protect it with another 4th. The idea is to constantly be moving towards the enemy and upgrading and growing. If I have all the resources I need, I will eventually even consider moving into the Mythic Age for the god power, but usually at this point I am in a fantastic spot to push out the enemy or at least overwhelm them with a super large economy. And depending on this point of the map, it really depends on if my enemy has been preparing the appropriate way for this advance, and if they are not, I simply just beat them down with the large economy and constantly producing units that they just get overwhelmed. So let's go ahead and look at the pros. The pros of the strategy is now that you have a booming economy, it basically is incredibly difficult to beat back because of its size. In the heroic and mythic ages, that's the amount of resources you generate is incredible, and it's very, very hard to slow down. Also, the larger buildings secure gold mines and settlements, so you can basically advance with pretty solid protection. One of the other pros to this strategy is that it's fairly simple. Like, it's very easy for me to pick up. It has definitely helped out in my time learning this game. I think I'm only about like somewhere between 50 and 100 matches in, and it seems fairly effective as I've played through. Now, I will say that it does come with time, and there is a bit of, timing, I think is the best way to put it, of when I need to be managing my resources, but it really has been effective and has helped me out getting that first win, you know, that was kind of the idea. This strat is also fairly easy to carry over from one pantheon to the other. Honestly, it shows best for the Egyptian, especially Ra and the empowered stronghold units, and probably less effective for Norse, but I also kind of view the Norse as to be more aggressive early on. Now, of course, this strat does have some cons, and the big one being is that it takes quite a bit of time to develop and can get delayed heavily and ended if a good early attack is sent in at the right time. Because we are so resource starved in the classic age, it's hard for us to build up the economy that we want to and also deal with all the invaders. This method also can be a coin flip towards the end of the matches, just because it could be a mirror against another big economy style build and that can outplay or outdevelop you. I tried playing this style as set against a Greek player, and I got rocked by an early attack, and I couldn't come back from it. There was nothing that I could do to catch up in that time. He just simply set me back early and then outpaced me towards the end, and that was it. So I have found that while this is effective in some cases, it can be easily crushed with early game aggression. If the enemy is passive, then this build can thrive, but aggression really slows it down to the point that there's only been about 1 or 2 matches where there's been early aggression and then I still come out with a win. Perhaps I delay the movement into heroic age and focus more heavily onto the unit production and upgrades in this case, but overall for me, learning the basics of the game, it has been an absolute blessing, as I know where I can take the end goal, you know, like that's something I could focus on. I'm still learning, I'm still having a great time playing Age of Mythology, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this strategy, and if you would do something different. If you want to see my first foray into Age of Mythology, into that world, you can click this video here. As always, stay caffeinated, folks.